Chapter 5 An Arrow for the Restless Dead. In another second, the distance between the girl and the hideous thing had been bridged, and Sally Sherwin was screaming in its embrace. Frantically, she struggled to free herself. She jerked her shoulders back and beat with clenched fists upon its board-like chest, her breath coming in heaving gasps. The horror's breath was fetid, its squirming body reeking with the odors of the grave. Mercilessly, its long, dirt-encrusted fingernails raked her flesh, inflicting deep gashes on her bared back and heaving bosom. For 5 full minutes, Sally fought with every ounce of her strength. So frenzied were her struggles that she did not hear the door open or see Nancy Summers advancing into the room, a look of unutterable horror on her face. Nancy Summers was clutching a 4-foot wooden bow and a gleaming bob-tailed arrow. When Nancy Summers had borrowed Sally's bow and arrow set to practice with on the school archery range, she had never dreamed that returning it would expose her to the most ghastly peril she had ever known. She stood now, white and shaken, her mouth as dry as death. She could hear the pounding of her own heart above the vampire's harsh breathing. "Don't touch me! No, no!" There was a strangling horror in Sally's voice. The vampire had seized her dark hair in one scrawny hand and was fastening its greedy lips on her throat. Nancy Summers knocked her bow with automatic fingers, her gaze riveted on the cadaver's squirming back. The room and Sally seemed to recede as she stared. She had eyes only for that ghastly, twisting lich, a shape more foul and terrifying than all the sensations of nightmare. She knew that she must kill it. Swiftly, remorselessly, or Sally would be lost. Her eyes did not waver as she raised the bow and took deliberate aim. There was a sharp twang. Screeching, the thing that had been Simeon Hodges twisted about and tugged frantically at the long barbed shaft which was quivering between its shoulder blades. Nancy shrank back against the wall and stared wide-eyed at the petrifying sight of blood gushing from the horror's mouth and spattering on walls which were spinning and heaving sickeningly. The vampire had turned and was stumbling straight toward her across the room, its gray face twisting in anguish, the arrow still vibrating in its flesh. Its eyes were glazed, but it seemed to sense that Nancy was responsible for its plight. Nancy's head was spinning madly. She feared that she was going to faint. She saw Sally Sherwin sway, clutch at the dresser, and slump with delirious babblings to her knees, her hair falling over her face. She saw the vampire's arms go out. She could smell the taint of it now. It was very near and reaching for her, and she could not move at all. She stood as though paralyzed, terror beating into her brain. An instant of sickening unreality followed. She thought the vampire was already upon her, and then she wasn't sure, and then an awful coldness seemed to sweep over her. Then, oh merciful God, came the sound of a familiar voice. "Get her out of here, Limerick! Damn it, man, take over!" Strong muscular hands descended on her shoulders and pulled her toward the door. She shuddered convulsively, but offered no resistance. Dimly, she sensed that Limerick was too terrified to realize how cruelly he was bruising her flesh. Through the door he dragged her, his breath rattling in his throat. "His number is up, Nancy," he wheezed. "Empty is putting the squeeze on him." Nancy's lips twisted, but no sound came from them. She had caught a brief, hideous glimpse of the vampire writhing beneath Cummings on the floor. Cummings had pinned the foul thing down with his knees and was driving the long wooden arrow deep, deep into its quivering body. For an instant, through the doorway, she saw its dark blood gushing out over Cummings' hands. Then the merciful dimness of the corridor enveloped her, blotting out the sight. Briefly, she saw crude wooden crosses waving in the dim corridor light and smelt the sickening odor of garlic. Then the white, terror-convulsed faces of milling students swam close to her and coalesced into an enormous gray smudge which swooped in and swirled and spilled over her until she went utterly limp in Limerick's arms. It was curious how seldom a girl fainted in just the right pair of arms. When awareness came sweeping back, the first person she thought of was Freddie. She felt very sorry for Freddie. Poor kid. She had foolishly imagined that she was in love with him. It was just her maternal instinct running away with her. She realized that now. Lying on a sofa in the reception room of the girls' dormitory, staring up into Cummings' anxious blue eyes, she realized that there was only one man for her in all the world. "Thank God we heard you scream in time, Nancy," Cummings said. "We never thought it would try to get into the femme dorm." Nancy smiled wanly. "I'd rather not talk about it, darling," she said. "Not just now." "Darling?" "I said darling." For an instant, she thought that Cummings was going to pass out from shock. She had to reach up and pull his head down and kiss him on the mouth to bring back even a little color to his face. "I don't think so much of your bedside manner, darling," she said.